The airplane cabin hummed with a low, steady vibration as passengers settled into their seats, the kind of sound that faded into the background once you accepted that you were suspended miles above the ground. In the first-class section, the air felt heavier, perfumed with expensive cologne, leather seats, and quiet entitlement. A white woman wearing a thick white fur coat adjusted herself dramatically, sighing as if the world itself had inconvenienced her. Her name was Linda Hawthorne, though no one around her knew that yet, and she believed firmly that first class was a reward she deserved, not a shared space. Across the aisle, two black children sat beside their father, Marcus Williams. The kids, Malik and Jordan, were dressed neatly, their small sneakers spotless, their hands folded in their laps as they whispered excitedly about flying for the first time in first class. Marcus watched them with a protective calm, the kind earned from years of knowing how quickly joy could be misread as disruption. He wore a tailored black suit, his posture straight, his expression composed, but his eyes stayed alert. Linda glanced sideways, her smile tightening the moment she noticed the children. Her eyes lingered, scanning them in a way that made Marcus's stomach clench. She shifted in her seat, crossed her legs sharply, then pressed the call button above her head. A flight attendant approached, smiling professionally. "Is there a problem, ma'am?" the attendant asked. "Yes," Linda said loudly, her voice slicing through the quiet cabin. "I didn't pay for first class to sit next to children, especially children like that." The words hung in the air. Conversations paused. Malik looked up, confused, while Jordan frowned, sensing something was wrong but not understanding why. Marcus felt a familiar heat rise in his chest, but he stayed silent, watching. The flight attendant blinked, clearly uncomfortable. "Ma'am, these passengers are seated correctly," Linda scoffed. "They're being disruptive. Look at them. They don't belong here." "They haven't said a word," Marcus said calmly, finally speaking. His voice was deep, controlled, practiced. "My children are behaving better than most adults I see." Linda turned fully toward him, eyes flashing. "Excuse me, don't get smart with me. I know my rights. This is first class, and we're first-class passengers," Marcus replied. "Just like you." A murmur rippled through nearby seats. A man across the aisle shifted uncomfortably. Another passenger pretended to read, though her eyes kept darting toward the scene. Linda pressed her call button again, harder this time. "I want a supervisor. Now." As the flight attendant hurried away, Malik tugged gently on Marcus's sleeve. "Daddy, did we do something wrong?" Marcus smiled softly at his son, despite the tightness in his chest. "No, buddy, you didn't do anything wrong." Linda rolled her eyes. "See? They're already talking." "They're allowed to speak," Marcus said. "They're human." A senior flight attendant arrived, followed by the cabin manager. "What seems to be the issue?" the manager asked. Linda launched into a dramatic explanation. "These children are making me uncomfortable. I paid a lot of money to sit here, and I expect a certain atmosphere." The manager glanced at the kids, then at Marcus. "Have there been any complaints about your children's behavior?" "No," Marcus said. "Because they haven't misbehaved." The manager nodded. "That's what I was told." Linda's face reddened. "Are you kidding me? Look at them. They're loud. They are sitting quietly." The manager interrupted gently but firmly. "Ma'am, I don't see any issue." Linda gasped. "So you're taking his side?" "I'm taking the side of facts," the manager replied. For a moment, Linda looked stunned, as if she'd never encountered resistance in a space she believed belonged to her. Then she stood up abruptly, her coat brushing Marcus's arm. "This is unbelievable. I demand to be moved." The manager considered her for a moment. "We can look for another seat." "Good," Linda snapped. "Finally. But it won't be in first class," the manager added calmly. "This section is full, and your complaint isn't valid." A sharp silence fell. Linda stared, mouth open. "What? We can offer you a seat in business class?" the manager continued. "Or economy." "You can't do that," Linda hissed. "We can," the manager said. "And we will, if you continue to disrupt other passengers." Linda looked around, expecting support, but found none. The man across the aisle met her gaze briefly, then looked away. The woman nearby shook her head slightly. Linda scoffed, grabbed her bag, and stood, This airline is ridiculous. As she was escorted away, Malik watched her go, eyes wide. Daddy, why was she mad at us? Mahaka swallowed, choosing his words carefully. Sometimes people get scared of things they don't understand. But we didn't do anything, Jordan said. I know, Marcus replied, pulling them close, and that's what matters. Once Lyndon was gone, the cabin slowly returned to normal. The tension eased, replaced by quiet murmurs and the hum of the plane. A flight attendant returned with drinks, offering the kids apple juice and smiling warmly. You two are doing great, she said softly. Marcus nodded in thanks, though his hands trembled slightly now that the confrontation was over. He hated that his children had witnessed it, hated that moments like these were lessons they learned too early. As the plane took off, Malik pressed his face to the window, marveling at the clouds. It's like cotton, he said. Marcus smiled, watching his son's wonder cut through the ugliness of what had happened. He reminded himself why he stayed calm, why he chose dignity even when disrespected. Because his children were watching. Always watching. Across the cabin, a woman leaned over. Excuse me, she said to Marcus. I just wanted to say, you handled that beautifully. Thank you, Marcus said. My kids are grown, she added, but I remember how hard it is to protect them from things like that. Marcus nodded. You do what you can. The rest of the flight passed peacefully. Malik fell asleep against Marcus's shoulder. Jordan read quietly, his feet barely reaching the floor. No more complaints, no more stares, just the steady movement toward their destination. When the plane landed, passengers stood and gathered their bags. As Marcus and his son stepped into the aisle, the cabin manager approached again. Sir, he said, I'm sorry you experienced that today. Marcus met his eyes. Thank you for handling it. The manager nodded. Your children were a pleasure to have on board. As they walked off the plane, Malik squeezed Marcus's hand. Daddy, first class was fun. Marcus smiled. Yeah, he said softly. It was. Outside the plane, the world continued as it always did, imperfect and challenging, but full of moments worth holding on to. Marcus knew there would be more days like this, more people like Linda, more lessons his children didn't ask for, but he also knew that his sons would grow up understanding their worth, unshaken by ignorance, grounded in love. And that, he thought, was the real first class. As they moved through the terminal, Marcus felt the familiar mix of relief and exhaustion settle into his shoulders. Airports always did that to him. Too many eyes, too many chances for a moment to turn sharp. Malik skipped slightly ahead, dragging his small suitcase, while Jordan stayed close, still thoughtful, still quiet in the way older children became after sensing something unfair. Marcus watched both of them, measuring their silence, wondering how deeply the moment on the plane had sunk in. At the baggage claim, Malik suddenly stopped. Daddy, he said, looking up. Why did that lady think we didn't belong there? Marcus paused. Other travelers flowed around them, laughter and announcements echoing off polished floors. He knelt so he was eye level with his son. Some people think places belong to certain kinds of people, he said carefully. They're wrong, but they think it anyway. Jordan frowned. Because we're black. Maftas didn't flinch. Yes, Malik's brow wrinkled. But you paid for the seats. I did, Marcus said. And even if I hadn't, that still wouldn't make it okay. Jordan nodded slowly, absorbing it in pieces. So she was the one who didn't belong. Marcus smiled sadly. Her attitude didn't belong. They collected their bags and headed toward the exit, sunlight spilling through the glass doors. Outside, the city buzzed, alive and indifferent. Marcus loaded their luggage into the car, then sat behind the wheel for a moment longer than necessary. He exhaled, gripping the steering wheel, letting the weight of the flight finally release. On the drive, Malik talked again, animated now, the heaviness lifting. When I'm big, he said, I'm gonna fly first class all the time. Jordan glanced over. Me too. And nobody's gonna tell us we can't. Marcus smiled into the rearview mirror. That's right. Later that evening, in the quiet of their hotel room, Marcus tucked Malik into bed. Malik yawned, eyes already drifting shut. Daddy, was you scared on the plane? Marcus hesitated, then nodded. A little. But you didn't look scared. That's because sometimes being brave looks like staying calm. Malik smiled sleepily. I want to be brave like that. You already are, Marcus said, kissing his forehead. In the other bed, Jordan sat awake, staring at the ceiling. Marcus noticed and sat beside him. What's going on in that head? He asked. Jordan was quiet for a long moment. I didn't like how she looked at us, he said finally. Like we were doing something wrong just by being there. Marcus nodded. That feeling stays with you? But listen to me. You don't carry her shame. She does. Jordan turned toward him. Will it happen again? Yes, Marcus said honestly. But every time it does, you'll know who you are, and that matters more. Jordan thought about that, then lay back down. Okay. The next morning, Marcus received an email from the airline. It apologized formally, offered flight credits, and praised his composure. He read it twice, then closed his laptop. The apology felt thin, but the acknowledgement mattered. Not for him, but for his sons. Later, at breakfast, Malik proudly told the waiter, "We flew first class yesterday." The waiter smiled. That's so? How was it? Really good, Malik said. Except one mean lady. Marcus watched the waiter carefully, but the man only shook his head. Well, he said, setting down plates, some people forget how to behave in nice places. Jordan smiled at that. As they left the restaurant, Marcus realized something subtle had shifted. The boys walked taller, not louder, not defiant, just steadier. The world hadn't suddenly become fair, but they had learned they could move through it without shrinking. That afternoon, Marcus called his sister. He told her about the flight, his voice even factual. She was quiet for a moment, then sighed. I hate that they saw that. So do I, Marcus said. But I'm glad they saw how it ended. That night, Marcus lay awake, replaying the moment Linda had stood, outraged that she wasn't automatically believed. He thought about how often anger had been mistaken for authority, how often calm had been mistaken for weakness. He thought about how close he'd come, just once, to raising his voice, and how deliberately he'd chosen not to, because his sons were watching. Weeks later, back home, the memory surfaced again at school. Jordan's teacher mentioned an upcoming field trip involving a flight simulator. A classmate joked, "That's probably too fancy for some people." The room went quiet. Jordan raised his hand. "That's not true," he said clearly. "Anyone can be there." The teacher smiled. "That's right." When Marcus heard about it later, his chest tightened, then eased. He realized then that the lesson hadn't been about enduring disrespect. It had been about refusing to accept it as truth. One evening, Marcus framed the boarding passes from the trip and hung them quietly in his office, not as trophies, but as reminders that space is claimed by presence, that dignity doesn't require permission, that sometimes the most powerful response is simply staying seated. And somewhere Mafkuz knew Linda would remember that flight too, not as the day she was inconvenienced, but as the day her certainty cracked, if only slightly. For Marcus and his sons, it became something else entirely. A story they would tell, not with anger, but with clarity. A moment that taught them they belonged wherever they chose to be, not because someone allowed it, but because they existed. And that knowledge traveled with them, lighter than luggage, stronger than fear, first class in every sense that mattered.